What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're taking a look at double game week 22. So who are the best options for Man United and Leeds United? What do their fixtures look like after the double game week? And is there anything else we should consider? So quick reminder, Man United are playing Crystal Palace at home and Leeds at home. And then Leeds have got a slightly tougher double with Nottingham Forest away and Man United away. And we're going to start off by looking at Man United options first of all. So like I've just said, double looks pretty good. I think both from a goals perspective and clean sheet perspective as well. If you can or don't want to double up on the Man United attack, I wouldn't completely write off doubling up on the defence instead, although I think the options, especially from a long-term view, are quite limited. But it is something that you could do because those fixtures are pretty good. In 23 and 24, you've got Leeds away and Leicester at home, which aren't bad either. The only thing to consider is game week 25. We know that Man United are 3-0 up against Forest in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup, and if they get to the final, they would blank in game week 25. Newcastle also look likely to get to the final, so they would blank as well, and so would their opponent Brighton. I'm thinking about how people's teams are set up right now. There's lots of double Newcastle defence owners, Trippier and Botman, maybe Matoma, maybe you get a few Man United players as well. It's a lot to deal with, and if you use all your free transfers in game week 22 to get Man United players, you only have one transfer in 23, another in 24, and then one more in game week 25 to fix your team for that blank game week. Now, a few things to say. One, you don't have to have 11 players in game week 25 or any blank game week for that matter, but I do think if you plan correctly, you can easily do that this time around, at least for game week 25. And you can also bring players in and then take hits later on if you want to. I think for some teams, they're going to have so many players missing in 25, it might not be worth tripling up on Man United. But at the same time, I know if it was me and I was in that position, I would want to make the transfer and just gamble they get enough points in game week 22, especially with the fixtures they have, to then remove them later. So each individual team is going to be different. You're going to have a think about that yourself. Defensively, Shaw is the best option because, as we've seen, he can play left centre-back or left-back and he's pretty much nailed, but he has been ill, so I don't know if he's going to be available for game week 22. If Ten Hag says that he is, then obviously you keep hold of him if you've already got him, and he probably is the number one target to bring in. If he's not available, it gets a little bit trickier because if Shaw's out, Martinez and Malacia suddenly become better options, but only because Shaw is out. Once he's back, they are then both risks. For what it's worth, I think Martinez will play left centre-back way more often than not. It just worries me a little bit that we've seen Shaw play there even since, or obviously since the World Cup, even when Martinez has been available. So that kind of puts me off a little bit. Then you look at the other side. At the moment, Wan-Bissaka is playing a lot because Dalot is out. But once Dalot is back, the minutes will be shared. And to be honest, Dalot will probably get more. But until he's back, you can't risk bringing him in, especially when he's been out with an injury. He might come back and only play one game, miss the other one, just as he's building up to fitness. So the next best option from an actual defender is probably just to go for Varane, but it's not that exciting. But I think that's what you're kind of limited to, Shaw and Varane. If like Shaw or Dalot was ruled out for a long time, that's different. Then maybe you go for Wan-Bissaka or Malacia or something like that. But it's not like they're massively attacking, and you probably will have to get rid of them again by game week 25. So that's why, although it's something you could do, I don't think it's that exciting. The other option is to go for De Gea, but you wouldn't want him as your only keeper because you need someone to play in game week 25. But someone like Ward could fill that hole. You could also go for maybe Kepa and De Gea. That could work as well. All things to think about. Attacking-wise, it's a little bit simpler. Rashford and Fernandes are the standout choices. Rashford's in great form. He is Man United's main goal threat at the moment. And with Fernandes, his goal threat isn't as high. Obviously, he can chip in with assists as well. But he plays 90 minutes pretty much every game. You're not going to see a team sheet for Man United very often without Fernandes in it. So that's why he's probably worth paying that money for the double. But I don't think he's essential. If you're happy, the big priority really this week is to make sure you've got a Man United attacker for captaincy. And if you've already got Rashford, you've basically got that covered. I think you could go for Fernandes captain instead if you wanted to. You know he's always going to be on the pitch, and ultimately he will be a differential. But if you're happy captaining Rashford, you don't need Fernandes. So you could look elsewhere, or maybe even just have one or two Man United players instead. In terms of other attackers, it does get more difficult. Antony is mostly nailed on, but we have seen a game like against Man City where Fernandes played in his spot. mostly because of a kind of defensive strategy from Ten Hag, but it can happen. And Antony can also come off early as well. We've seen some games where he comes off, Rashford moves to the right, Garnacho plays left, for example. So he's not completely nailed on, but he's also cheaper than Fernandes, so it might be worth a bit of a punt for those of you that can't get to Bruno. And then with Weghorst, is tricky. If Martial isn't completely ruled out, then that basically makes Weghorst a no-go in my opinion, because Martial is still first choice. If Martial is fit or available, but we don't know if he's definitely going to play, I think it kind of rules both of them out. If I had Martial at that point, I'd probably keep him, but I wouldn't look to bring him in. If Ten Hag says Martial's out for a couple more weeks, and you've got Martial already, I quite like the idea of going Martial to Weghorst as a bit of a punt, where he's only like 6 odd million. It's not really that much of an issue if he doesn't do anything, because you've not spent a huge amount of your budget on him. And I think with those fixtures, he could be worth the risk, knowing that if Martial's not back, you've then got Leeds and Leicester before you have to get rid of him. Again, you bring someone like Weghorst in, he doesn't do anything. It's going to be a bit frustrating that you know you've got to use a transfer on him later on. But I, again, think it could be worth the gamble. But that's all going to depend on what Ten Hag says. If he says Martial is available, then it just puts him and Weghorst as kind of options that I wouldn't look to bring in. It's only really for people that already own Martial that should be thinking a bit more. So I know it's obvious, but Shaw, Rashford and Fernandes are definitely the best three to go for, as long as Shaw is available, because he has been ill. Outside of that, you're probably looking at De Gea, Varane, and then maybe Antony and Weghorst as punts. I know it's like hard to go into a double game week without the maximum amount of players. Just bear in mind, they're probably going to blank in 25, and you will need to get rid sooner rather than later. For example, I've got those three, Shaw, Rashford and Fernandes, and there's every chance that my transfer in game week 23 is to get rid of Fernandes, possibly for Mahrez. So I like him, but I'm already making plans to get rid of him. Again, you don't have to do it straight away, but just to let you know. And then looking at Leeds options, I don't think they're keeping a clean sheet in either of those games in the double. I think if you really want someone from a defensive point of view, it's probably just Meslier. I wouldn't go for any of the attackers. And the only defenders, sorry. The only reason I say Meslier is because you can hide him behind your other goalkeeper for all other weeks. Like if you've got Kepa, you could have Meslier as well and just bench Meslier most weeks and just play him for this week only. But I just can't really see that it's worth a transfer. Even for my team, like I've got Ederson against Spurs away. I could use a transfer to do Ward to Meslier, have the double game week player this week, and then put Ederson back in from next week. I still don't know if it's worth a transfer. I just think if I bring a Leeds player in, a defensive player, I'm going to regret that pretty quickly. And I just wouldn't fill one of my defender spots with any of their defenders. That's just my personal point of view. It could be different. It would help if they had a better double. Like 2 away games is not great, and then they run straight into Man United. The only good thing for Leeds is they will play in game week 25, and that fixture is pretty good. But even that does not necessarily make me want to bring in a defensive option. Attacking wise, I would only look at Rodrigo or Gnonto. What I would say about Leeds attackers is they've got a lot of options right now. Like Bamford's getting back to fitness, so is Sinistera. They've just bought Rutter. They've got Rodrigo, Gnonto. Harrison can play wide as well. Aronson too. That's 7 players that I've just mentioned for only like 4 spots. So there could be not necessarily. I'm not saying that Rodrigo and Gnonto is going to get benched anytime soon, although it could happen. But they could have their minutes managed within games. I quite like Gnonto because, according to most Leeds fans, and again, maybe they're wrong, maybe I could be wrong, he seems to be the first name on the team sheet right now, and he is only 5 million, and he does take up a forward spot. So if you're on a 3-5-2 like me, he does give you that extra double gaming option this week. You then bench him for 23 and 24, and then you've got him for that blank game week with a really good fixture against Southampton at home. There's obviously a risk that by game week 25, he's lost his place, but I think the first fixture in game week 22 for Leeds is the 5th of February, and the game in game week 25 is the 25th of February. So he'd have to lose his place in like 20 days. And he's playing so well right now, I just don't think that's going to happen. So I like him as a 5 million punt. I guess the issue for a lot of people is they then have to bench one of their attackers this week. And if you've got a really good squad, that could be a difficult decision. But I like Gnonto. I also like Rodrigo as well. I think it's interesting. We've talked about him quite a lot this season, how a lot of Leeds fans don't see him in their first choice 11 when everyone is fit. But one, not everyone can stay fit, as we've seen a lot of times, especially with Bamford. And Rodrigo has just done well this season, and Jesse Marsch seems to really like him. So I think he's going to continue to start, but you could see games where he comes off by the 65th, 70th minute. So that could be a bit of an issue. But for a midfield punt, I don't mind him at all. And I think, although Man United at home and Everton away aren't necessarily great fixtures afterwards, if you had to play him in those games, I don't think you'd be that concerned about doing it. And because he plays in 25, there's no real rush to get rid of him. I think it all comes down to that kind of opportunity cost that we've spoken about before. If you put Rodrigo in, whose spot is he going to take? Who could you have instead? So hopefully, yes, the FPL page comes up here. Like for my midfielders, I know everyone's going to say Salah, but for a lot of you, you're on 3-4-3. You've maybe got Fernandes, Rashford, and then possibly 2 Arsenal midfielders. And if that is your midfield, where does Rodrigo fit in? Is it worth taking out one of those Arsenal players? You could, for those of you that want to get rid of Martinelli, do Martinelli to Rodrigo, and then in 23, to justify it when Arsenal have got a double, do Rodrigo back to a different player like Odegaard, for example, for those of you that want to make the switch. But for most people, I'm just not completely sure where Rodrigo fits in. So that's the only issue. That's the only reason that I think Gnonto is maybe a slightly better option. Is some people are on 3-5-2 and it's just easier to fit him in. But they're the only two I would look at. I think Bamford hasn't shown enough that he can stay fit this season. And obviously Rutter is a new sign-in. Sinistera, Harrison, Aronson, I just don't think I would put them in my team unless you really want to load up on Leeds players. So for Leeds, Rodrigo and Gnonto are probably the two that I would look at. I'm not sure I would go for both of them. If you have to have a defensive option, it's probably got to be Meslier. I just wouldn't want a Leeds defender in my squad. And then for Man United, Shaw is the best defensive option. Probably Varane if you want someone else, or if you don't want to go for Shaw because he's out or something like that. De Gea if you need a goalkeeper. And obviously Rashford and Fernandes, the two best options. But you could well take a punt on Anthony and Weghorst depending on the Nottingham Forest Carabao Cup game, which we will see before the Game Week 22 deadline, and also what Ten Hag says in his press conferences. So let me know down in the comments below how many Double Game Week players are you going for and which ones. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it, hit subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.